afternoon. Welcome to Discovery Live, Ask a Music Therapist. My name is Nick Duart with Fort Collins Museum Discovery. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, we are happy to welcome back Faith Halverson Ramos and Anastasia Canfield, two music therapists from right here in Colorado. We're hoping that this conversation is interactive. If you have questions out there while you're watching, please, whichever, if you're on YouTube, Facebook, put some comments in the chat, and we'd be happy to get those questions to our guests. So please welcome Faith and Anastasia. How are you both today?
Good. How are you?
Can't complain. It's been a crazy week, but that's no different.
Yes. Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us again. You're back for more, so we didn't scare you away last time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
We're therapists. It takes a lot to scare us. Speaking from my own experiences.
I like that.
Yep.
So for those of us, or for those just joining us that didn't, get to meet you both last time, why don't we start with Anastasia? Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your history towards music therapy?
Yeah. So I am a board certified music therapist. My first master's degree is in neurologic music therapy from Colorado State. So Fort Collins has a special place in my heart. And then my counseling background, my mental health background is from Northwestern. I got my second master's in mental health counseling from there. I own a private practice called Creative Remedies based out of Aurora, and I also work for my colleague's private practice, Rocky Mountain Music Therapy, which serves the Longmont Boulder area.
Awesome. And Faith, how about you?
Yeah, I'm a board certified music therapist and also an LPC, licensed professional counselor. I completed my music therapy and counseling training at Naropa University in Boulder as part of the Transpersonal Counseling Psychology program. And I have a private practice in Longmont that addresses mental health issues. Sometimes we use music therapy in that work, and sometimes it's just traditional talk therapy.
Awesome. Can be whatever it needs at the time.
Exactly. Oh, I should say it's called Soundwell Music Therapy.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing Soundwell?
I've been in private practice for 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for a little over 4 years as a music therapist with a startup hospice company. And prior to that, I worked as a special ed paraeducator with Boulder Valley School District, working in early childhood education settings.
So while we're waiting for some questions to show up, I've got a couple of my own. It's been a wild year, as we talked about last time, and what was this, a few months ago, the last time we chatted, and obviously we were in a very, very interesting place. Things are starting to feel a little better in some ways, starting to flourish again, vaccinations are happening, these types of things. How have things changed for you, or have they not changed? Are you starting to get back into in-person things, or still trying to do things virtually? How have things been? And that's for either of you. Feel free to jump in.
For me, things, there's been some change. I mean, some people are starting to come back in person, in office, and that's, for me, I really, in a lot of cases, leave that up to the client. A lot of folks that didn't think they were going to like teletherapy, have really enjoyed it and have decided to stay, in that realm, but others, just feel really isolated at home, and so actually going to the office for therapy for some of them is actually a reprieve, even more so than just the therapeutic benefit of therapy itself, but just being in that space as well. And so probably about 80% of my caseload is still online. And the vaccines certainly help, but I still require masks and the whole thing. Still getting a lot of referrals. People are still really struggling in a lot of ways, and understandably so. I think this is a hard time for all of us, and so it's definitely hasn't slowed down. In fact, I just hired a new therapist because there's been a lot of just continued referrals and a lot of need. And also a lot of need for groups, which I'm finding a lot of people are asking about, which is new for me. A lot of people in the past have wanted that individual therapy time, but now I think kind of in that same vein of feeling very isolated, people are looking for others that they can be in support with and in support of.
Connection. That's really cool.
Mhm.
How does that work with what was what a group session look like? Is it everyone playing together or doing similar activities together musically?
It really depends. So the I mean it yeah, I think primarily the music is going to be coming from the therapist in a group setting. However, at this point in time, I say that at this point in time, mainly because I'm thinking about I'm not likely going to be putting drums in everybody's hands while we're still in this, you know, in this weird limbo of things are safe-ish, but also not. So ideally, sometimes, yeah, there would be a lot of active music making, but probably that would look more like maybe singing or maybe like body percussion, more so than what a group would look like prior to COVID. Um, but yeah, and it also depends a lot on the group goal too. So one of the groups that my new employee is starting is a grief and loss group, and so there's probably going to be quite a bit more verbal processing in addition to his musical contribution to that. Maybe some singing as well, but also have to be careful with that because singing projects and
As long as
those
your
things.
office is
So
25 feet across, you should be fine.
I know we're gonna have to figure that out.
It just sounds like it's problem solving. I mean, and I think that's, you've mentioned this before too. It's every case is different and every situation would be different, but it's really interesting to the group situations. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. How about you, Faith? Have you had any group type uh,
No
experiences?
groups. I've been seeing people individually in my office and online for a few months now. Again, masks. I have a HEPA air filter and measured how far my chair is from the
Yeah.
couch to make sure that there's appropriate space and I'm fully vaccinated. Um, so in terms of like my individual work, things have been incredibly busy. I mean, as a therapist who's able to take insurance and who's in the process of also becoming a Medicaid provider, there's such a need. Um, so I've been very busy individually. I'm hoping though that as things get kind of back to normal-ish, that I'll be able to resume some of my contracts with the St. Vrain Valley School District that I'd been doing the previous years, doing music groups with one of the effective ed programs in the district and also the teen parent program, because oh my gosh, making music with babies is
It's the warm fuzzies.
totally. To then contrast that with some angry kid who is going to chuck a kielbasa at your head.
Which you don't want. So
It's a
again,
nice contrast.
those sound all different too. Again, and whatever the specific need, you're just these chameleons that are able to go in and fit some type of a treatment to those things. It's really impressive. It's a lot of
Yeah. I mean, I think, at least for myself, I think really what it is about how can I be in relationship with this person and how can I provide the client that I'm working with a type of relationship that they likely have not experienced before. And sometimes that ability to be with that person stimulates like a musical intervention idea. And sometimes it's just being able to hold space and be present and be non-judgmental. about how a person is presenting in that moment.
Love that. We have a question from Eric P. What is the best way to find a local music therapist for someone wanting to start services? It sounds like you're about to get a little busier.
Go ahead.
was just going to say, if you're in Colorado, a good place to start would be the Colorado Association for Music Therapy. That's our state association.
Mhm.
And you can see members from all over the state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, on the Colorado Association for Music Therapy website, which is musictherapycolorado.org. There's also listings of where the music therapists are located, what their specialties are, and their contact information. Another place to find some music therapists would be cbmt.org. That's the Certification Board for Music Therapists, and the acronym cbmt.org. And search for Colorado or search for your specific area. And all of the music therapists listed there are in good standing with their board certification as well. So yeah, and sometimes there's some other referral sources, but those are the places where you're going to find the majority of the music therapists in practice in Colorado, whether it be private practice, working in a hospital, or working in numerous settings.
Awesome, thank you for that. Now let's think about that. If someone, like I've had a therapist through this whole quarantine, this whole thing, just to keep me on track, keep my wits about me so that I can be successful in all the things I'm trying to do. If I decided, what would make me think I should try music therapy? What's the thing that would make you say maybe you'd be a good candidate for music therapy rather than just talk therapy? Are there specific things? And I know this is, again, a broad question, but I feel like I just, as a musician, get asked a lot, what's music therapy? And not being a music therapist, you realize quickly how little you know about this field, how little I know about this field. As I knock things over.
Well, some folks that I work with actually have a separate talk therapist, and then they see me for music therapy specifically. And not only have they sought that out, but actually their therapist recommended it because they're working on, they're maybe doing EMDR in their therapy with their talk therapist. But then also they sought out a music therapist, myself, who also has a mental health background, to be a supplement to that. But then also some people who have a music background might really be interested in that sort of approach. Some people who don't have a music background but really enjoy music and find that they have a different experience just kind of in life whenever music is really a big part of whatever their day-to-day looks like. Even if it's just listening to a certain Spotify playlist or something, they find that music is moving to them in a certain way, or it can help like unclog in a way some things that otherwise just talking through can be really buried deeply, and then the music can almost open the dam, as it were.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I find that, excuse me, I find that people who may have a difficult time finding words to describe what they're experiencing can benefit from music therapy because it evokes thoughts and feelings that they might not otherwise be able to capture in the moment with their words. So that can also include people who have experienced trauma, childhood trauma, where they don't have the words, language wasn't developed at the time, and it can help a person to process through that, bring things up to then integrate into their experience. With that as well, I have found that a lot of, and I don't remember now if I mentioned this the last time that I was here, but I have found that a lot of men, young adult men, I should say, have specifically sought me out for therapy because they wanted to incorporate music. And my little theory um, is that music is like one of the few places where men can be open to, it's okay to express a variety of feelings, like
Emotions are connected.
music is, music's a safe channel for that sort of exploration.
Absolutely. I think I was probably 15 when I put my first band together, and it was, exactly what you'd imagine it is. It's just teenagers talking about whatever is going on in their day, their school, whatever it might be, siblings and that kind of thing. But it's a way and you don't even know at that age, but you're getting together with your friends, connecting on this common purpose, this thing, trying to all play the same song most of the time, and varying degrees of success, right? But yeah, being able to express those things, it's important, and it's such a good way to put it. Because there are, I even, I'm very open with my experiences with therapy, but I have friends who are not, and are maybe not willing to go into these things. But the saying keeps popping in my head. It's the when words fail, music speaks. You know that you've seen those posters and things, and it's very true, because there are a lot of us that just put the headphones in and retreat to a favorite playlist, a favorite album, something like that, just to get yourself centered and calm down. And if you're in crisis, you're having a tough time. So that's powerful stuff. Mm-mm-mm.
Yeah, and with some of the teens and young adults that I work with who have been like involved in the criminal justice system, music also provides them with a safe way of like sharing their story and like being able to find understanding without having to go into the full details of their experiences.
Absolutely.
And it's been, actually, I have to say, it's been really amazing and powerful, like how these young people who may have been written off as being like resistant to therapy just open up just because music can be available as a way to build connection and allows them to be seen, and you get a vibe going on.
Hmm. Common language, right? And
Yeah,
understanding. That's
yeah.
fantastic. It's powerful stuff. It really is. Really, really cool.
In that
Have you?
same vein, too. Oh, sorry.
Mhm.
In that same vein, too, and very similar to what Faith was saying about the vibe and things like that, is that music therapy is safer for some people. And she mentioned the young adult men. I've also had an uptick in particularly young adult men, ages like 20, 21 to 30. There's been quite a few that have sought out music therapy specifically. And I think it's because that vulnerability there it can be externalized to some extent whenever you are using a creative medium like music. And so it feels a little bit safer to go there. It feels a little bit more manageable and tolerable, as well as being able to get the same level of catharsis or maybe even a deeper catharsis sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. I think too about having an uptick in that age group. It would make sense to me, and again, you could speculate for forever, but thinking in terms of, I mean, 21 to 30 is when most of my musical years were, when I'm dug in every weekend. We're playing as many shows as possible, we're rehearsing all the time, trying to be in as many bands as possible. And that industry just totally hit pause 14 months ago. Everything stopped, shows. So this is, and I talked with a lot of my friends, because I'm still a professional musician, still play, and it was very interesting how the creativity stopped as well. It wasn't necessarily just that, okay, we're not doing live shows for the next year, and I'll just sit here and we'll woodshed. I'll practice and get better, and basically just work on those skills in a different way. However, the motivation for me at least was completely sapped, and I didn't have that energy to sit there and work on songs or to do any of those things, and I felt like I didn't have things to say in an odd way, which is not true because there's so much going on and so many feelings and thoughts about it. But I don't know. I guess I'm glad to hear that people are seeking you out and that music therapy is an option. Really, really good.
Yeah, it's been interesting, this pandemic. I mean, we've been collectively going through this traumatic experience, and like raises all these existential questions and issues, and for musicians, it's very like putting the pieces together. And so like can bring up a lot of survival stuff, like how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to eat? Like when you're stuck in that survival mode, it's very difficult to have the mental bandwidth to create.
And then there's so much downtime to be sitting with your thoughts, and yeah, it's just a completely different change in routine, all those things as well. Been a very, very interesting time. I've definitely read some articles that are not super optimistic about the amount of bands that will return after this whole thing. But I think it's just like anything. There'll be a regrowth and a rebirth, and especially locally, Northern Colorado, we have such a strong music scene and such a strong community of musicians that it's really good. That's been one of the best things for me, and I think it's probably why I stayed in Colorado, is because of the community of music up here. And kind of going along that vein, have you been involved in the music community in Boulder or in Denver, where you guys are based and work, or school and all these things? I don't know. Have you had any interactions with on that level, I guess?
Yeah, actually, it's funny that you say that because I'm actually sitting in a recording studio right now. um,
So am I,
and if you
technically.
hear drums in the background, that's my duo partner recording drums. So
I heard like a little kick drum coming through, and I was like, "Is that my heartbeat with the mic on the?" No, okay. I'm glad it wasn't coming from me. Cool.
Awesome. So yeah, and I have a solo project, and I also play in a ska punk band. And it's been weird. There's shows are starting sort of again. And Faith actually came to one of my shows a few weeks ago. Thanks again, Faith. So she's definitely supporting the music community. But it's yeah, I think it's a really mixed bag. There's some people who are really, really optimistic and think, this is a new era, this is a new time, digital music is really, really becoming that much more on the map now, that there haven't been live shows, and there's so many options for live streaming shows, and some of these big festivals that nobody ever thought could be live streamed or put online or whatever are now, like the iHeart Radio Music Festival is online and stuff. And so it is an innovative time, but then there's also the sense of community that you get whenever you go to a show, and you meet new people, and there's a lot of camaraderie there that also can be lost in the live stream. But then also, for some people it's more accessible. Yeah. There's some people who've never really been able to go to live shows consistently who now can. I know it's probably a little bit different than a different direction than what you were asking. But yeah, it's interesting because some of the bands that we've played with in the past, are taking a big hiatus, or some are really, really gung ho, and some of them never even stopped during the pandemic. They were doing house shows and things whenever venues were closed, and some, it's all over the place, and people. Some people have still been going to the shows. Some people have just said, hopefully you're going to live stream it and I'll watch it from home.
it seemed like that's where things were kind of going in for some musicians anyway. You know, we ran launched a program with Bohemian and Colorado Sound last fall called Sonic Spotlight for youth musicians and all this, and we learned a lot just from benchmarking ahead of time and questions and you know after evaluations after the fact. And it was funny because one of the things that of all that, you know, what are you hoping to get out of this entire program, this process, and learning from industry professionals and all this stuff, and live shows was pretty much down the bottom. It was like the bottom 3 out of 15 or something things, which was wild because it was all about like, I want to, you know, grow my career. I want to be better at being a musician. I want to, you know, learn all about how to record and do these things. And you're right. The digital music movement is just this, you know, you can get a record deal and get a publishing deal and get your songs on a TV show or commercial and never have played a show, which was always possible before, but it's just now becoming more of that. I have a laptop and I can produce my own music and make it sound exactly like I want, and no one takes a cut, and they can start their Patreon or whatever it might be, you know, that they can just have people coming to view them. It's an exciting time, but it is also very different. So crisis breeds creativity, right?
Indeed. Yeah. As far as like my involvement with performing in live music, I don't perform much. I do monthly music for Unity Longmont. So I do music for spiritual services. But my husband is a violist and violinist who's been on the scene for a long time. Actually, his band is going to be playing this Friday at the Grossenbart anniversary show. But, you know, here in Longmont too, like similar sounds like up in Fort Collins, like there's a really strong community of musicians here with like Clandestine Amigo, Jessica Carson's project, Antonio Lopez, you know, these people who continue to make things happen. And of course, Bonnie and the Clydes, well, Bonnie and Taylor now, but because I don't know if they're playing as a band. I think they're just kind of doing duo stuff now. But, you know, I'm happy to say that these local musicians are my friends. And it's been interesting seeing how they've all managed through this. I know Antonio released his new album at the beginning of the new year, which is an amazing album. It's one of those albums that just rips my heart out. And I know Clandestine Amigo released their album, and Bonnie and Taylor had amazing success with their I Saw Red, I think it was. They did like a soundtrack for some Netflix show, and like they've had millions of hits on Spotify.
Fantastic.
Oh, Everybody Loves an Outlaw. I think that's the name of that project.
All right. I'm gonna like take some notes here because again I've kind of been out of the loop. But Antonio Lopez. Yeah, it's just an amazing place to be a musician, and apparently to be a music therapist too. I would think is this do you think there is a more lively music therapist cohort out in Colorado, or I mean, is this something you find everywhere? In every state, are you going to find readily available music therapists that are, you know, options, or does Colorado have a little more going on like we do in other ways of music? And that's just a strange question, but
I would say that in Colorado, we seem to have a greater variety of music therapists and music therapy practice. You know, like there are a few of us who work in mental health. There are some of us who specialize in like traumatic brain injury and neurodegenerative disease. And there's a group of us who specialize in working with older adults, autistic people. But I would say like the East Coast, like in the American Music Therapy Association is our professional association for music therapy. And we have different regions. And the Mid-Atlantic region with New York, Pennsylvania, those states, I would say they have a really lively, uh, rich community there. But
Makes
I don't
sense.
know how much of that is. I mean, they have a variety of different schools, training programs there that have different orientations. Whereas, like in Colorado, we're in the Midwestern region, we don't have as many training programs in this area. And CSU is the only training program in Colorado at this point.
Oh,
So I
interesting.
think that also influences sort of the flavor of music therapy and music therapy practice.
Hmm. So, in other words, there are certain specialties within music therapy that you might go seek out different schools for that particular program.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Or like to practice in New York, they have an LCAT, licensed creative arts therapist.
Hmm.
So there's that like extra level. Whereas here in Colorado, we're working on getting title protection and making it clear that music therapy is its own
A specific thing.
profession
Gotcha.
and comes with specific training.
Yeah. Interesting. Was there anything specific, Faith, that when you were looking for your program that you wanted to make sure, or programs, I guess the first dipping your toes into music therapy, that you specifically said, this is the type of therapy that I am interested in, the specific focus?
Well, actually, I didn't really know what music therapy was when I decided to study it. My undergrad's in vocal performance, classically trained. My teacher gave me a brochure for the music therapy program at Naropa. Like, I always knew that what I wanted to do was psychotherapy. And so when I saw this brochure for this program that would allow me to become trained in both, and a program that recognized like this spiritual dimension of being human and living, um, that was all I needed. But I was also living in South Korea at the time. So, I mean, I didn't have a lot of opportunity to like research other programs. I had friends who went to Naropa when it was still the Naropa Institute, and Boulder was kind of like my sort of scene. And
Awesome. The rest is
there it
history.
was. Yeah,
That's
it
great.
was educational when I got to Naropa and learned just how vast music therapy is and all the different ways that you can practice it and all the different people and settings that you can practice it in. It's like,
Yeah. How about you, Anastasia? Anything specific that you were really hoping to achieve with your education, or that took your education in a certain direction?
Um, I really like the neurologic aspect of neurologic music therapy, and CSU was known for that for quite some time, and still is to some extent. Um, and so that was a big draw for me. But I also, at the same time, like Faith mentioned, she always knew she wanted to do psychotherapy. I was really interested in the mental health realm, but I was interested also in the neuro stuff too. And so it was an interesting journey, going through a program that was very neurologic music therapy focused, which so often was, we learned about neuro rehab and things like that, which definitely have a place in mental health, but there's also other aspects of neurology that are impacted by, psychiatric illnesses, or socialization, and nature, nurture, all of that. And so, in some ways, I'm still sort of figuring out that path with the background in neurologic music therapy, but then also, this degree in mental health counseling. I'm reconciling some things from both of my master's degrees, which I think has been really helpful, and also for me personally, it's not feasible for everyone, but that's that's been a really uh, fascinating sort of self learning
Hmm.
opportunity, of taking some of the things that I learned from CSU and then applying them to the things that I learned at Northwestern. A few years ago, I did a presentation at a music therapy conference about the neurobiology and neurochemistry of music, which like combined a lot of those things. So interpersonal neurobiology is a big theory and people are talking about that a lot in the counseling and psychotherapy realm and psychiatry realm, but not necessarily something that we hear about in music therapy. And so that's sort of the stuff that I'm trying to put together, taking some of that neurologic music therapy, interpersonal neurobiology, and marrying those two for my own understanding and being able to articulate these things to my clients. But also, yeah.
I like it. It's so interesting though, because it really is. You are creating your own style of music therapy based on these other practices and other things that you're putting together. That's super powerful because, like you've both mentioned already, I mean, it's an individual problem solving situation, right? Every therapy session is going to be its own thing and its own unique needs and requirements and things like that. Do you have any, because we have a lot of young people watching these, what if someone was looking into they're in high school and they're saying, oh, therapy, but I never thought about music therapy. What advice would you give? Are there any advice you would say? Just curious, the specific things. What do you think? And for either of you.
Do you mean to study or to
Sure, to get started
experience?
on the way of music therapy, if this is something that sounds interesting, how would you end up getting to the point where you are a successful and licensed music therapist?
Well, the first thing that I would suggest is that they look at the American Music Therapy Association website and just learn a little bit more about what music therapy is, what the educational training and process is for it, and to think about how and who they might want to help as a therapist, because then that can help inform where they might want to apply to school.
Yeah. In addition to that, I would say, interview a music therapist. Watch this, I guess. If it's possible, which it isn't always with HIPAA laws and things like that, but if it's possible to shadow a music therapist, if there's someone who has clients who are willing to sign a release for that, to do that, or even just sit down and ask music therapists like what their day is like, and in multiple different settings too, because it always, like you had mentioned, Nick, it looks different for every case. It also looks different in every environment too. So from person to person that we're working with, it looks different, but then also the way that we use music looks different depending on the setting in which we're in, and the requirements that we have to follow. Say, like if we're working for a hospital versus private practice, things might be different based on a lot of different things, safety and accessibility to instruments and funding and things like that. But then also, reach out and look at the American Music Therapy website, American Music Therapy Association website, musictherapy.org will provide a lot of information about how to become a music therapist, what any sort of prerequisites are. Like, say, if someone already has a bachelor's degree and they want to become a music therapist, this is a question that I get quite a bit, actually. Well, I have a degree in psychology. Can I become a music therapist? Maybe, depending on what other background you have and how much. Because we have a lot of psychology and neurology background, but we also have a lot of music background too. Our degrees are music degrees. And so sometimes that can sway people one way or another, depending on, like Faith said, what they want to do, who they want to help, and how they want to help too, and how much they want music to be involved.
I like that. Do you think
Yeah.
it's, I mean, it's obviously more important to be, or it's obviously important to be a musician, to be a music therapist, to have
Mhm.
that language
Mhm.
It's
internalized?
mandatory.
Yeah.
Mandatory.
I was about to say,
Just
it's
wanted to make
important,
sure
but it's
it
also
was said.
necessary.
We have to be able to sing. We have to be able to play the piano, play the guitar. There has to
Hmm.
be a certain level of musical literacy.
Mhm.
Of course, that's also what form of musical literacy is a topic of conversation in the music therapy world. Like, is it only going to be classical Western music, or are we going to look at um, other other musical styles, other cultures, other ways of performing music that don't require um,
Notation
written
kind of.
Notation.
notation?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Super interesting. Because yeah, even it, I guess like, once again, depends on whatever the treatment plan is and whatever the goal, and
Yeah.
I like you mentioned this first thing, Faith, but it's all about, who do you want to help? And that should always be the first question. And that was just that's a really powerful statement, because really I'm sure there are many different ways to help people, and if music is your thing, maybe this is the way to explore.
Mhm.
I like that a lot.
yeah. Just in case there are high school students or young people watching this who want to learn more, and maybe they go to the AMTA website and they feel a little overwhelmed by all the information there. There are a lot of music therapists on Instagram, and there are a few on TikTok. So, you know, you can reach out to music therapists through social media and see what they're putting out there and get a sense of what their practice looks like that way as well.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mm. Yep. Let me see. Remind everyone, if you have any other questions for us, we've got some little time left. So put them in the chat, and we will make sure that we get these questions out here. I had a couple questions already that I put aside, but I think we've touched on most of these. Let me think here. We did get one question from beforehand that I hadn't asked as of yet. How is listening to I'm sorry. How is listening to music that helps me different from actual music therapy?
So I'm assuming that what they mean is just their own personal listening, like listening to a playlist that they've made or something, versus actually going to a music therapist.
That's how I read it, is in terms of
Okay.
I could listen to the music that I like to normally calm me down versus an actual music therapy session.
Mhm. I would say that that is beneficial, and that is an important part of what we do as music therapists, and that's not to be negated by any means. But there is in music therapy practice, we think about the client, we think about the music, but then we also think about our relationship with the client too. And so that is a piece that someone's not going to get from listening to their own playlist. And that's not to say that the playlist isn't helpful. Again, that's a really important part of part of our work. But at the same time, the relationship is a big part of that, and us being able to provide therapy services as well. Like Faith said earlier, she's also a licensed professional counselor. I'm a licensed professional counselor candidate. I'm on my way to becoming a Faith. And and so that aspect is also important to the therapeutic process. And some people can get through a moment with just a playlist, but some other people would really benefit from having a very tailored, specific treatment plan geared toward them and geared toward their music preferences and geared toward their therapy goals too. So I guess it ultimately would boil down to what is the goal overall? Is the goal to get through a moment on their own, or is the goal to actually process something in therapy.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that listening to music is just, it's an intervention that could be used in music therapy. It's a therapeutic use of music, but part of what makes music therapy is that ability to, well, I should say, in the way that I work as a music therapist, part of what makes music therapy is the ability to process what comes up and to be able to help the person with reframing their thoughts or their beliefs around a particular situation, and like to help them go deeper into understanding what it is that's going on for them, rather than listening to a song as like a coping
Mhm.
tool.
It's a yes and.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you both so much for your time once again, and thank you all for watching, all of our viewers, Facebook and YouTube, etc., out in the world. Again, these are always special. I always learn new things, and thank you for giving us your expertise. It's meaningful, and especially in a time like now when we're all sort of coming through, and maybe people are looking for something different than just normal talk therapy, or maybe they're looking to be something other than a talk therapist. So yeah, fantastic information, and I'm happy to have done this, and thank you both so much.
Thank you, Nick.
For sure, and all the viewers, please view in and tune in 2 weeks for our next Discovery Live, which I don't know what it'll be yet. It's going to be a surprise. So, thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.